Hello, welcome to the Australian Institute of Untitled Chapter. My name is Boz Fisher and I have with me
Peter Natterer.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Today we're going to be exploring something that's both deeply personal and profoundly impactful. The stories we tell ourselves. These narratives don't just shape how we see our work, they influence our decisions, relationships and the choices we take. The question is, how do these stories drive our actions for better or for worse? And more importantly, how can we rewrite them to foster trust, better engagement and better resiliency?
Absolutely.
Peter, again, excellent. You're the best person to talk about this. What do we mean by the stories we tell ourselves? I think we need to frame what that actually means to start off with.
Yeah. So the stories that we tell ourselves are the movie reels that we keep playing over and over again in our lives. And you can kind of identify them by the words by I never or I always, those kinds of stories where I always do that or I never do that.
Yes.
And that they will then create inside of your experience a reality, because the unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a real or an imagined experience. And if we imagine something strongly enough, then it becomes a real experience. We can tell ourselves a story that creates ourselves as the hero or as the victim.
Yes.
And the victim, we will always try to align our circumstances to fit our story. It's very simple.
Yep.
It's interesting also that the internal... The stories that we have an internal effect on us. For instance, if we tell ourselves positive, uplifting and empowering stories, our dopamine, which is our feel-good hormone, versus our cortisol, which is our stress hormone, dopamine outweighs cortisol by 4 to 1 if we tell ourselves the right story. It's like when you've come out of a really satisfying movie and you go, wow, that was really great. So your dopamine levels are absolutely high.
Yes.
We can choose to do that for ourselves.
Okay. What's the underlying idea behind the stories that we tell ourselves? Why do we tell ourselves these stories?
We tend to have views about ourselves that we would like to have persist in our lives. And to do that, we give ourselves empowerment, but we also give ourselves excuses. So by saying, well, I was never really good at maths, but, so I don't expect me to calculate what the sales tax is going to be on this one.
Yes.
Or it's like, I'm always lucky. I always get a car park. Well, you don't always get a car park, but on average, on the output, more likely than not, I'm going to get a car park.
All right, so let's start. So what is the most powerful story you've told yourself, and how has it sort of shaped your decision for good or for bad?
So this story has a pre-work history to it. When I was at school, I absolutely disliked mathematics entirely.
Yes.
So the maths quote before is actually very personal. And the moment I would see a maths situation, whether it was in my head or otherwise, I would just glaze.
Yes.
Then at one point I did programming, computer programming, and all of a sudden I realised that I wasn't such a slouch at mathematics.
Okay.
Now all of a sudden the whole world changed. Now how I approach things is I can pretty much in my head, without too much of a calculator, figure out certain, not trigonometry, but basic mathematical problems. Which means that now when I sit down and do calculations on sums and this, that, and the other, I'm pretty well already ahead of what's going on. I also have a way of approaching things. It's changed everything about how I now approach my work. So spreadsheets, problem solving, the whole work. So it just shows the fan of the spread of spectrum of things that a story will actually affect.
Okay, excellent. So let's sort of focus down on what we tend to see in an organisation, which is basically how do we look at internal narratives when you hear such words as "I'm not valued here" or "they owe me," and how does it get developed within an organisation to start with?
There's two ways of looking at it. It can be a setting of low expectations internally.
Yep.
which has been shaped by things that may have come out from outside of
Yep.
that particular work
Yep,
environment.
yep, yep.
Or it could be an actual reflection of what they perceive as going on inside of the organisation. And if they say, I don't feel valued, or they don't pay me enough, or whatever the story might be, then that's actually language that is an indicator of what's going on inside of their own story.
Yes, correct. How do organisation cultures or leadership shape these narratives within an organisation?
Very indeliberately, with no deliberation whatsoever. The experiences that a particular person has inside of an organisation are random,
Yeah.
but not. It comes down to how they are continually being related to. So if you go up to a particular manager who's always supportive, always sees the right, sees the sunny side of the street, you'll find that you approach that manager with a whole different story in mind than if you go to somebody who's constantly ragging on you and giving you did this wrong and you made a mistake there and you didn't put a punctuation point there. Different scenario entirely.
Yeah. What are some of the sort of common internal justifications that employees might rationalise to themselves when it comes to doing something that's unethical?
Usually these stories are built up over time.
Yeah. No one wakes up in the morning
Correct.
and says, I've got to do something unethical.
So think of a story, another name for it could be a justification. I'm doing this because of that.
Correct.
They don't pay me enough, so I'm going to take what I want. They did me wrong here, so guess what? I'm going to hit them where it hurts. So those are the kind of negative stories that come out, and they will pop out in the language. We were talking before about the language of betrayal. We betray ourselves to anybody who will listen by the subtle words that we use, it could be sarcasm, it could be a joke, which is fine if you do it once or twice. But if it becomes a pattern, then all of a sudden somebody's got to turn around and say, "There's something going on here."
Yeah. How do sort of cognitive dissonance play roles in stories that employees tell themselves? Whether doing something wrong or doing something right.
Yeah. The dissonance is always going to be against the worldview that they hold inside of themselves.
Yep.
So we tend to be goal-seeking, I guess is the one word. We tend to seek that which we tend to portray. So if we are now thinking that we are wonderful here, wonderful there, but we're getting a feedback from the outside world, from our managers and such, that you're absolutely terrible at this, you did that one wrong, there's a dissonance that starts off there. That dissonance creates a tension inside of the person, and two things could happen. Either the story will change,
Yep.
and then their performance will lower to the level of the story they tell themselves, or their ego kicks in and says, well, I'm not having that. And then you start having problems going forward from there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. How do leaders sort of identify when their employees or an employee is going through some challenges? For example, they're going to becoming more disengaged.
Yeah, it's again, it's a discipline of observation and a discipline of empathy. You're talking about changes, so obviously they know what this person was like at some point in time,
Correct.
and at this point in time they've now changed their demeanour. And it could also be a manic behaviour as well, too, where they're going off on a tangent. So it needs a certain amount of observation and also feeling into what could be happening for this person, and then asking the question, what's happening?
Yeah. And this is conversely is what are the risks if nothing's done? So if you do see someone or an employee that's going through some challenges, and you probably can identify that they've got different stories that they're telling themselves, what happens if it gets ignored?
Interesting point. I think it's a framing that has to happen inside of the person doing the observation. it's so easy to turn around and say, well, I'm not going to mess inside of their personal environment. But if you reframe it and say, how's this affecting the organisation? How's that affecting what we're actually trying to achieve here? Yeah. Is this a hindrance, or is this a help, or is it neutral?
Yep.
And it's from that standpoint that you then turn around and make a decision, okay, I'm going to take this course of action.
Yep, yep. So what can management or leaders do to help employees, with the challenges, with their stories? Or
I think it's important not to impose a new story on a person. If a person is telling themselves a certain story, they've got a good reason for that story.
Correct.
Whether it's comfort, whether it's experience, whatever it is.
Yep.
It's like you cannot tell somebody now you must be happy. Or
no,
you must
exactly.
Be this.
Yes.
It's got to come from inside of themselves. So, look, one of the best ways to do that is to kind of take it offline and sit down. Hey, let's have a cup of coffee somewhere outside.
Correct.
We'll have a chat about it, and want to have a chat, see, and then just ask the generalised question. So, how are you?
Yes, exactly.
What's happening for you?
Yeah. Because I want to dive in a little bit more deeply in this idea of reframing. I think the idea of, let's say, a manager or a line manager or a supervisor coming to the employee and saying, I see you've got a problem, we need to change it. It's not as easy.
No, I think to a certain extent there's a certain amount of counselling that's needed inside of that. So as a manager who's taking responsibility for a staff member who's having a difficult time, it's kind of getting the trust for them to expose what's going on for them.
Correct.
And then gently allowing them to see whatever's happening for them in a different light. So reframing basically means, the classic is, if you've got lemons, make lemonade.
Yes.
But you cannot tell somebody to do that. You must get that buy-in from them. Oh yeah, maybe I could see it this way.
Yes, correct.
And that's a coaching / coaxing exercise that has to happen.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Because there's so many holes that can be dug if it's done incorrectly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you could push people further into their...
Yeah, that's what. You could push them further away and make it worse.
Exactly.
So which leads me to the next question, which is basically, how can an organisation foster a culture that encourages open dialogue and then sort of challenges that sort of internal dialogue before it takes root?
It's not something you can do in a team exercise.
No.
It's something where, the story that people tell themselves, the stories that people tell themselves are intrinsically value-based. This is my value.
Correct.
This is my sphere of action. This is how I expect myself to act.
Correct.
That's not something that you can expose in a team environment. You really need somebody to sit down and actually find out what this person values about themselves, what they don't value about themselves, and then potentially suggest different things as well too.
Yeah. What role does empathy and active and active listening play in shaping the employees' sort of behaviour, their stories, and so forth?
So, look, empathy is your radar.
Yeah.
Active listening is your sonar.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
You really need those two skills to be able to get some under, because nobody will tell you. You go, what's wrong? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
You really need to send out signals and find out what comes back, and then interpret those signals.
Yeah. Is there a way that management executives can be trained with specific programs that can actually engender or help them do better with the challenges that maybe that employees face?
Yes, and that is to understand their employees a little bit more than just functional units.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about upper management, I'm talking about the team management at the team level. those people that are directly under your care are under your care.
Yes.
And this is your team, and this team is going to either make or break what it is that your unit does.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of responsibility that I think, and you'll get to know them if you're working with people on a day-to-day basis. You'll get to know what floats their boat, what makes them work better, what makes them work less, and you calibrate what you do according to that.
Yeah. Is there a way for organisations to address these challenges that employees might have, but also in the same time balance and make it fair for everyone else? Because so let's say focusing on one specific employee and providing them with all the resources to overcome whatever the challenge that they might be going through, maybe in the detriment of his or her colleagues. Is there a way that can be done?
So there's two sides to this. You can actually there are actions that you can take that are appropriate inside of inside of a work context. So for instance, if somebody's having a hard time, case comes to mind, somebody's child is sick. Yes, you can work from home for 2 days, or whatever the case may be. That is definitely inside of the frame of ability. I mean, the spectrum outside of that is so wide I won't even go into that. The second thing is, how do you make it fair? And that is to make sure that everybody else understands, should they be in the same boat, they would be afforded the same offer.
Correct.
Correct. So, if somebody says, well, so-and-so is off because their child is sick and they're the only parent, well, I guess that would also happen to me if my spouse was sick and we had nobody else at home.
Correct. I think the important thing is also for his or her colleagues is to actually understand what the situation is going, without getting too personal.
Correct.
So they understand and they say, okay, this is fair. Okay, so let's conclude it. What is the key takeaway from the stories we tell ourselves?
The stories we tell ourselves shape where we go. It becomes our targeting mechanism. It becomes that which we strive towards, that we measure ourselves against, and we have control over those stories. We like stories that we like, and those become self-replicating, but we also have the ability to change those stories and decide we're going to tell this story now. The better the story, the more that we create our sense of value, that we create a sense of action, the higher our internal rewards, the dopamine versus cortisol balance happens, the more we then tend to seek out those kind of environments and also create those environments.
So with this story being told, thanks Peter, much appreciated. Thanks for watching it, and I'm glad you're part of the GitHub.